Discussions with a Creationist Part 4. The Hovind Clone. In a previous video, I described Christopher as having a Kent Hovind cut and paste accreditation. I will now demonstrate. Christopher took all his arguments from Mr. Hovind directly from a debate that he later alluded to. I will insert the relevant parts of that video here. Kent Hovind is a creationist and a debater and a liar, and he's currently in jail for tax evasion.
The article you sent me shows that the genetic data is indicating that all dogs in the world came from a dog. I could have told you that. The Bible says they bring forth after their kind.
The Bible says the animals are going to bring forth after their kind, not species. The Bible says they bring forth after their kind. All we've ever observed is animals bringing forth after what anybody of average intelligence would consider the same kind.
The main difference between a creationist and an evolutionist is this. The creationist goes by the observable evidence that dogs produce dogs.
Dogs produce a variety of dogs.
And determines via the Bible that there will be a genetic limit to the changes.
But there's a limit. 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 But there's a limit. There's a limit in there someplace. But these adaptations have limits. It's just the gene pool has reached its limit. Adolf Hitler said, if you tell a lie long enough and loud enough and often enough, the people will believe it.
The evolutionist takes a giant leap of faith to think that there are no genetic limits.
And they try to make a giant leap of faith and logic, and then people are left to make the giant faith of leap and logic.
And teach that all dogs in the world came from a rock, billions of years ago.
You're teaching your students that all the dogs in the world today came from a rock. It's just the gene pool has reached its limit. And the cheetah's right at the edge and probably will not survive. But that doesn't prove we all came from a rock.
This gets into the argument of the difference between species and kind.
What is a kind?
I'd like to maybe ask you a question also to go along with your question. What is a species?
I'm writing a booklet on general atheist evolutionist arguments. And here's a section from it on this topic. Though most scientists today use the term species, there has never been a good definition for that word.
There's never been a good solid definition of species.
Most definitions for species will include an interbreeding population. For example, a horse, a zebra, and a donkey are classified as different species, yet they can all interbreed.
For instance, if you get a horse and a zebra, they're probably the same kind of animal.
If anyone would know the definition of species, it would be Dr. William Moore. He's a 35-year tenured evolutionary biology professor at Wayne State University.
The debate I did against Professor William Moore at the University in Detroit at Wayne State University. He has taught the subject for over 30 years at university level. He is considered one of the experts on the evolution topic.
And he was asked about the definition of species during a public creation evolution debate. He said,
This is my area of research, and to be honest with you, I don't know.
Parenthesis. Did you hear what I hear? He doesn't know? Well, of course, if you hear this cherry-picked quote taken out of context, you may be puzzled, unless you listen to the rest of his argument, and then it all makes sense.
However, Darwin, in a sense, wrote The Origin of Species, but he also created the problem, what is a species? Because before Darwin's time, before Darwin wrote The Origin of Species, there was no problem with what a species was. It was each individual distinct act of creation. But what Darwin said is a species arises in a continuum. And the problem is that when we see species, we see distinct entities. Even though wolves and dogs can interbreed, anyone at least anyone better be able to tell the difference between a dog and a wolf. There is a profound difference between them, and there's this discontinuity. There are really few intermediate forms. There are no intermediate forms between bananas and dogs, or whatever example Kent gave. And the problem with defining species, I argue, is the same as that in defining kind. A process of evolution has occurred, and as a result, there are circumstances, there are situations that are in transition.
Close parenthesis.
The main problem with the species argument against Noah's Ark is that the Bible has provided the word kind as a definition for animals, and then, thousands of years later, modern-day evolutionists came along and tried to provide a new way to define creatures with species. Then they tried to apply their modern-day classification to the Bible and call the Bible wrong.
I don't know that Carolus Linnaeus's classification system with kingdom, phylum, class, order, family, genus, species is the same as God's definition of kind. We today put, for instance, a whale and a dolphin in the mammal family. But the Bible may consider that a fish. After all, it does live in the water. And I don't know that it is or it isn't, but if the Bible does consider a whale in the fish kind, that would not mean the Bible is wrong. That would mean our current way of dividing animals up is different than the Bible's way of dividing animals up. That's all. You can't say one's wrong, one's right. It's just a different way of looking at it.
This is clear logical fallacy.
I would interpret that to be a lie.
I could go on and on like this, but I think I've shown my point. The point was that Christopher doesn't have any arguments of his own. He all gets them from Kent Hovind. But that doesn't necessarily mean that these arguments are wrong. I haven't demonstrated that they are. Good news, Kent Hovind has been already debunked over and over and over again. I provided a bunch of links in the description box below that will clearly demonstrate that Kent Hovind is an absolute liar. I've also provided a link to the original video of the debate presented here. Don't worry about DMCAs. Kent Hovind himself assured me that there's no copyright on the videos. Unless he was lying again?
What they're trying to say is God wouldn't have done it that way, so it must have evolved. Well, that's a dumb argument for evolution. Arguing against creation is not proof for evolution.
Okay, question for Dr. Hovind. What is your strongest piece of evidence for creation?
I think the evidence for creation would be the absolute impossibility of the contrary.